Hey y'all, hope you're doing well today. So in today's message, we're going to be talking about tolerance and how to find peace in this crazy world, okay? And I'm going to share some things about my experience and how this shift happened in my life, how it was a process, how it was something that wasn't just like flipping a switch. And we're going to talk about some concepts that I learned about in this book I was reading last night. So I can't wait to share that with you all. But essentially, this is all going to culminate in a grand change in our lives, right? How tolerance plays a part, where peace fits in, the process that we go through, all of this, how this serves to change us, and we end up a changed person for real, right? Despite the fact that all the craziness and chaos in the world, that's not going away, you know? So we're going to learn how we can, in fact, come to a place of peace. It may require redefining peace to understand it for what it really is, as opposed to what we thought it really meant, right? But we're going to learn how you truly can achieve that despite the craziness in this world. So kind of an important message, and I just hope that you find some value in it. And again, I hope you're doing well today. So let's go ahead and dive in. So, you know, tolerance is a big deal, because this is something that can be influenced within us, okay? Either on purpose from a controlling person, right? Using, you know, shaming and blaming techniques and tactics to get us to believe that we should tolerate more than we really should. And it's also something that can be impacted or affected and influenced by just our experience growing up, our conditioning that just happened because of our experiences, right? And it can set us up as an adult, you know, on a different point on this spectrum, right? Tolerating more than we should, or being so rigid that we don't tolerate enough. You know, we don't compromise, or whatever it is, right? We're very impatient and demanding or whatnot. So I just like to think of everything on a spectrum, you know, and just be able to expand my mind to see things in the middle as well, that it's not all either or and black and white thinking. So I just encourage you always to try and keep that state of mind, you know, that expanded way of thinking. It has served me well, you know, and that's why I just encourage you to try to approach everything that way too. So let me open by saying this, because we're going to be talking about the human mind, okay, the psyche. This is what I found, there are not many things at all in this world that are stranger than the human psyche. This is one of the most, talk about exploring, you know, the depths of the ocean, talk about exploring space, you know, and you know, way out there. And yet, right here within each of us is this unknown place that is just full of mystery, and all we have are theories, you know, and that's honorable. I'm glad that people you know, want to truly dive into the field of psychology and try to understand the workings of the human mind, because, you know, when someone does that with good intention, then, you know, they can bring forth fruit, you know, even if that fruit is just a lens for us to look through and say, okay, now I understand why this happened, or why I reacted that way when that's not really how I wanted things to be, or, you know. So it's an honorable thing, but the truth of the matter is it's still largely a mystery. And so the kind of things I'm going to share with you today, I'm going to share some things that I read out of this book I'm going to mention, and I forgot to bring it to show you, but I'll drop the link down in the description. But they're pretty wild. They're out there, and I can't wait to share them with you. So the book is called The Inner World of Trauma, and there's a subtitle called Archetypal Defenses of the Personal Spirit, and this is by Michael Stone. All right, so I believe. No, I'm sorry. I'm getting my two books mixed up. Michael Stone wrote this book here. So I'll have to revisit that book online, but I'll drop the link down here, and I'll put the author right here before I publish the video. But yeah, that's the name of it, The Inner World of Trauma, Archetypal Defenses of the Personal Spirit. And so I was reading a little bit out of it last night, and just flipping through different areas and reading, you know, this section, and then just flipping through until I found another section, because it all goes together, you know, and because I have so many things that interest me and so much going on in my life, I don't really feel like I want to spend my time just diving into one book cover to cover at this time in my life. So I like to pick and choose. But what we learn is that the human mind is a strange place indeed, and there are mechanics within it that are kind of like superpowers that serve to keep us sane, even though these mechanics, these same mechanics that serve to protect our sanity, can actually simultaneously work against us and undermine our efforts, our conscious efforts. So it's really bizarre. It's sort of like, it reminds me of that Sheryl Crow song, you know, if it makes you happy, it can't be that bad. And it's interesting, because if you think about just in a literal, concrete, easily observable example, someone who's addicted to drugs, and I'm not super familiar with this, but just from, again, observation, I feel like it's something that it's working both ways for this person. It's something that's pacifying them and simultaneously destroying their health. So it's like this weird dynamic. Well, these archetypal defenses that we're going to talk about a little bit that are described in this book are like that too. So that's what I mean when I say they're very powerful. They're like superpowers. So and then I also this morning ran across a short video. I'm going to drop the link in the description for you all, by Doc Snipes. That's the name of the YouTube channel. It's called Cognitive Distortions, and that's very much related. It's ironic that it was I think it was published today, that it wound up in my news feed, because it goes right along with this message and the things I read last night in the book. Okay, so she kind of touches on this topic of cognitive distortions, and it's it relates to those archetypal defenses within the human psyche. It's like these mechanics that are at work and we're unaware of them. Okay, and she talks about having no assumptions and being mindful that we don't catch ourselves, you know, acting from any kind of assumptions that are forming in our mind. It's like being aware of that within yourself. It's almost like you need to observe yourself, you know, to catch these things in action so that they don't undermine you. Okay, we're going to expand on this, but it's a great video. And it essentially is kind of like being able to identify these not only unconscious paradigms, trying to bring those forward, because that's hard, but it's also catching the stories that we tell ourselves, okay, that can come from assumptions, and I would say conditioning, okay, and also from these cognitive distortions. All right, so let me share a little real life story with you all. For a part of my life, I went through a stage of intense anxiety, and I tried to understand it. It didn't make any sense to me. You might could have called it social anxiety, but at times it was just kind of anxiety just in general too. And you know, if you've ever worked with the public in a customer service situation, you totally understand how people can be. Right? Especially this time of year. It's awful, because it's supposed to be a beautiful time of year, the holiday season, and yet people's emotions are all through the roof and stuff. So anyway, it's the whole trickster archetype at work, you know, amongst the collective, right? We're going to talk about that too. But But when you have anxiety in relation to working with people, right, like customers, it's hard because you can mean well and you can truly want this customer, this person, to have a great experience, you know, in their interaction with you. But essentially you have to admit that you have no control over how they're going to perceive the situation, how they're going to react to whatever goes down in the moment. You know, it doesn't have to just be applied to customer service, but this is my example. So I had a lady I was working with a few years ago. She was offering life coaching online. We actually became friends, and she was very just direct and straightforward, and I needed that at that point in my life. And I said, you know, I don't really know where to start, because I didn't at the time. I was very unconscious to a lot of bigger things in my life at this time. But I had some calls with her, and I just opened by saying, I don't really know where to start. And she's like, start anywhere. And I said, okay. Well, I get very nervous when I deal with customers at work, and I hate it. I wish I could just be not affected, you know? It's like logically understood that I shouldn't stress about things, but for whatever reason I was just always on edge, like, oh my gosh, is this person going to chew me out, or whatever it is. And so you know, I had observed people, you know, just out and about my life, you know, in different places. I remember this one manager I observed one time. She was being kind of chewed out by this customer, and she was just so professional and kept herself together and handled it. And you could tell that she kept this baseline foundation of peace. You could tell that she wasn't rattled, and I wanted that. I wanted that. And so I was talking about all this with her, and so we did this visualization technique, you know, where she wanted to she walked me through this you know, scenario on my mind. And in the visualization, she had me, you know, prepare for the worst case scenario in my mind before I entered into this interaction with this customer. And she was like, you know, if you do your very best, then you do your very best. And what does it matter? There's no, in other words, no reason within you to feel anything other than the peace of knowing you did your very best. That's going to be a big part of the message later on. So kind of hang on to that right there if you're taking notes, okay? But, you know, essentially, she was very honest with me. She said, it's almost like you're needing these customers to be a certain way with you. And she spun it like I was making the situation about me and my needs, that I need them to be kind. And I'm thinking to myself, well, everybody should be kind. And her point was that that's beside the point. Her point was that we shouldn't, that if we're in a place where we need someone to be a certain way, then see, there's this contingency there, right? And it's almost like a self-centeredness, you know? And so it was kind of like, oh gosh, you know, that's a really good point. If this person wants to come in and be in a bad mood, that's their prerogative. And it shouldn't have anything to do with me. Why would I make it about me, you know? So it was really a great way to crack that door open, just to kind of start saying, hang on a second. We're on to something. We've stepped foot on this path. I didn't know what direction to go, but yet it's still kind of, there was fruit there, you know? So it was good. And I mentioned this to you because I'm hoping this will help you in some way. All right, obviously all my videos. But there can be a self-centeredness that we can be unaware of. All right, and it can result in needing others to be a certain way for us to feel stable, like peaceful. And essentially this is putting the power in their hands. That's giving up your power. You know, I mentioned before when I was teaching, you know, when the teachers would have meetings, you know, a lot of times you'd hear somebody say, you know, don't let them know where you keep your goat. And I thought that was odd and didn't really click with me back then, but I get it, you know. And that's just it. It's protecting your pearls. It's like, you know, well, that I could go way off on that tangent. Let's not do that. But I also learned that that's something I need to explore. Why is my peace contingent on another person's behavior? It shouldn't be. But B, one reason that I came up with was that I felt like maybe it was because at that time I didn't have the tools to navigate the situation. I was trying to make sense of it. It's like, well, maybe I didn't know how to handle it. Maybe I just simply didn't have those skills, those social skills, to know how to handle a situation like that, to feel confident. And so that may be a part of it, and if you have this kind of experience socially, I just encourage you to explore that. Maybe you just need to have a mentor to teach you how to handle these sticky situations. There's no shame in that. A lot of us were not taught a lot of things, and it's not to blame anybody, our parents or anyone, but a lot of us, we just weren't taught. And so you have to figure it out, right? And maybe you come to the place where it would be beneficial to have a mentor. All right, so here's another layer. Okay, not only can we just have this anxiety and these moments with others because we don't have the tools to navigate the situation or the circumstance, but here's another layer to it. We may have an unconscious cognitive distortion or a belief from conditioning, okay, that made us feel responsible for others' well-being. So unconsciously, logically, we know we're separate people. You're walking in as a customer. I don't know you. I don't know. I'm trying to serve you the best I can, but why would we take a situation like that personally if it goes sour, if it goes bad, and you truly did everything you could? Well, again, there may be this unconscious belief that you are responsible. That's kind of getting into codependency, okay? Which is kind of like, as a quick example, another quick example would be children who grow up with a parent that's an alcoholic, and somehow, because they are having to be the adult in the situation, they're having to take responsibility where it should fall on this other person, right? That's where it really belongs, but the child is kind of thrust into this situation and made responsible. And another thing may be an emotionally or psychologically abusive parent that rages on the child and gets angry at them because they're projecting their other issues onto that child, and that child feels responsible, even though logically they're not, but they feel responsible. You see how this works? So if you have this, if it stresses you out really bad to interact with other people because they may be unhappy or they may react in a bad way, just visit that. Were you ever made to believe that you were responsible for someone else's well-being when you weren't? Right? Which we're not. None of us really ever are, because happiness is an inside job, right? It is. It's a personal thing, okay? Every person is responsible for their own well-being. But yeah, there may be this cognitive distortion that we're unaware of from our conditioning, okay? Yeah, it's like wanting everything to go so smooth is one thing, but to think that it's our responsibility or our job for everything in a situation involving other people to go smooth, everybody's responsible for their part, right? In other words, you have to recognize, okay, have I been unconsciously carrying the load for everyone, okay? So, yeah, I've already mentioned that. Now, what's interesting is, if you're made to believe that you can unconsciously or unintentionally make people mad, right? Like if you have this explosive parental figure, that's conditioning you in childhood to make you think that you're to blame for things that you're not to blame, that are not your responsibility, then you can become unconsciously overly defensive as an adult in situations that don't really call for it, right? And in so doing, because you have this unconscious belief that, you know, you're to blame for things not going right, then this defensiveness can be pervasive in your life. Subtle, but pervasive in such a manner that it can create situations that become a self-fulfilling thing. Does that make sense? I'm trying to explain it. Okay? And this kind of, to me, is at the heart of generational curses. It's like it starts with projection, you know, somewhere down the line, or misplaced anger, okay? And it's like somebody decided to offload their frustrations onto someone else, okay? And then this other person, it now has this belief that they're responsible for others, and they're, you know, bitter about it, and they're, you know, burdened by it, and it's an unconscious paradigm that keeps them in this awful state of mind, unconsciously, this mood, and they're real easy to trigger. You know, they're very defensive because they don't want to mess anything up. Okay? We have to stop demonizing anger. That's the first thing. As a collective, in our culture, our modern society, okay, God gave us a full range of emotions. And they're not bad. They're meant to be helpful. They're supposed to be helpful. But if we don't allow ourselves to acknowledge who and what truly caused our anger, as well as our conditioning, okay? But let's go back to just anger to complete this thought. If we don't really allow ourselves to acknowledge who it is that caused anger within us, then it can be misplaced, right? And cause a chain of events that will undermine our efforts and our desires, okay? So there can be multiple issues that can undermine us. Misplaced anger that's valid but misplaced. And also false unconscious beliefs from conditioning, okay? So in this book that I mentioned, The Inner World of Trauma, the subtitle is really the part that's very interesting when you're reading it. Archetypal Defenses of the Personal Spirit. All kind of things can happen to our mind when we don't deal with things correctly, okay? It talks about fragmentation, and even the development of this inner trickster archetype, okay? It's kind of like this part of our mind that develops from being shamed or blamed or whatever, from bad experiences. There's this fragmentation that occurs, and this inner trickster portion that forms. And, you know, if you look at it through the spiritual lens, this might equate to like possession, okay? This inner elusive influence that's going on within the unconscious parts of our psyche. This develops, and it develops with good intention to protect our sanity, okay? But it undermines us. That's why I call it the trickster role, because it's good and bad. And so it develops and fills in this gatekeeper role. So this becomes on the forefront of our mind, but we don't know it. It clouds our perception. It's the filter we see everything through. It's the lens we see everything through, okay? And it's very unhealthy because it keeps us, you might say, deluded, okay? And furthermore, it protects this delusion at all costs. So in the book, it was talking about several real-life examples, you know, that therapists you know, experienced with particular clients. And there was this one lady who was just, oh gosh, what was the term used? I think it was catatonic, if I'm not mistaken, but she had become a mute. She had just totally, is the word devolved, declined in her health. It was awful. And she was trapped literally by this by her mind, by this trickster archetype that had taken over and created this complete fantasy world in her mind. and it was triggered by an experience in her past. I mean, she had this belief of where she fit into this fantasy, and there was like this vampire, you know, with the wings, and like these otherworldly creatures, and it was just very fantastical, and so it was really interesting. I don't remember in that particular example if this is how this worked out, or if it was a different example, because there were several different patients that were given as examples. But the book essentially said this: when a person gets that far gone, you know, it's like the initial trauma can't be worked cognitively. It's not even accessible to the person, okay? It's been totally buried. And in order to resolve it, the whole initial trauma that's now in the unconscious has to be re-experienced so that the emotions associated with it can be reactivated and therefore be workable. So interesting, because when I read that, I thought this totally explains why someone can project something onto another person. Like I've heard before, I think it may have been Sam Vaknin, which he has a really interesting YouTube channel if you haven't seen it. He talks about the recreation of a childhood issue unconsciously within a married couple. He talks about how, for example, if a person can't break away from a controlling parent, like say a mother or whatever, they can't get, you know, out of that enmeshment, like emotionally, spiritually, you know, psychically. What they can do is then project this controlling persona from their parent, their father or mother or whatever, onto their spouse, and make them in their own mind the bad person, the villain. And then they're unconsciously working it out, trying to resolve this in another person. Is projection in that manner. And then when they break away from their spouse or whatever, it's like the soul is at peace because it's resolved this trauma, even though it was recreated over here, because it couldn't really be done here in its original place. You see what I'm saying? That's what I mean when I say there's no stranger place in existence, in my opinion, than the mind of a human being. And, you know, the superpowers it has that we have just barely begun to explore and understand. How incredible is that? So, yeah, this is where we can understand, start to understand unconscious projection. And their point in the book is that this process can be intentionally tapped into and utilized within a therapist's office, you know, maybe through hypnotism and things like that. You know, the trauma recreated and the emotions reaccessed and worked through with a therapist in a controlled environment, a safe and controlled environment, and it can be done successfully. So just a really incredible book. I encourage you to look into it if you have interest. But I like to look at those extreme examples. I didn't expect to read that in the book, but I just read it and I thought, well, I guess I need to share this with y'all. It's so incredible. But I think it is helpful when you're looking at the spectrum to truly understand these extreme sides so that we can kind of get a better understanding of, you know, what different aspects and to what degrees this kind of same mechanics can impact our life, you know, either in other people we're interacting with or within ourselves, right? So let me just say this. What if our tender spots are invitations to revisit something in our past that needs to be addressed? You know, I think that it's good to question things and to re-question and to revisit and to keep questioning things until they make sense. Sometimes it just takes that level of persistence and willingness to dig and explore. And it takes patience. That's the thing. It takes patience. You know, narcissistic people, they don't have any patience. They're very easily irritated and triggered. And again, narcissism itself is on a spectrum. We all have some qualities, right? But I'm talking about, you know, the people that are just totally entrenched in it, and, you know, that's just become who they are, right? And I typically discuss narcissism, that term, that label, which I hate labels, but I typically, for comprehension purposes, use it in my videos to mean somebody who's a wolf in sheep's clothing, a deceptive person living a lie, right? So, my friend that I mentioned, who I had hired as, my life coach at that time, she asked me a very important question at some point. She said, what are you not saying to yourself? What are you not admitting to yourself? What are you not allowing yourself to see, to say, to admit? There has to be open, honest communication within ourselves. We have to, like I mentioned in my last video, we have to be willing to call a spade to ourselves first. And you see the consequences when you don't. The mind tries to self-correct. And in so doing, and it's a spectrum, in so doing, it creates cognitive distortions. Sometimes mild, but still undermining us. And we don't understand why we're stuck and we can't make any traction. But sometimes it can be extreme. So being honest is crucial, and it's beautiful anyway. And you can truly be living honestly, or so you believe, in your life and with others, but yet on the inside, are you being truly, brutally honest with yourself? Because it's hard, but we truly need to welcome those really hard truths, the hard, bitter, very difficult to admit to ourselves kind of truths. We just have to. And so, and it means riding out the waves of emotion that come along with it. It's just part of it. So it's like admitting the truth to ourselves. Whenever we're able to truly do that, is the medicine that we need, because it can reset the psyche back to this baseline of peace, and when we can do this, then the defense mechanisms are no longer needed. See? So essentially, we're discovering that complete honesty with ourselves equates to peace. All right? And yes, there are still real evils in the world. I'm not saying, or I'm not suggesting black and white thinking, rather, or that it's all going to be okay, if we do some inner work. But what I am saying is that the world will be more easily navigated. We can navigate the world a lot easier, okay? Because we won't have any cognitive distortions in the way. All right? Our path will be made clear. So I hope that this is giving you some insights and some things to chew on. I hope it got the wheels turning. And I just thank you for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day. And I'll see you again very soon.